For several centuries, Carthage played a leading role both economically and politically. At its zenith in the early 5th century, it was at the head of the most widespread Mediterranean empires, covering the entire northern part of Africa, the mineral-rich southern region of the Iberian Peninsula, and a series of strategic positions on all the important islands of the Western Mediterranean: Malta, Sicily, Sardinia, and the Balearic Islands.
As the power and wealth of the Carthaginians continued to grow, Rome's jealousy and apprehension mounted, leading to the infamous Punic Wars. Battles took place in various locations on land, on islands, and at sea. I will not delve into these wars in detail, but will briefly discuss the factors leading to the birth of a new kingdom within the Carthaginian domain, which later, in turn, faced Rome in the Jugurthine War. Its description by the Roman historian Gaius Sallustius Crispus, also known as Sallust, serves today as one of the main guides to identifying the major cities of this kingdom. Sometime around 202 to 201 BC, Rome won the Second Punic War in part thanks to their loyal ally, Massinissa, who turned his back against the Carthaginians and Hannibal to support Scipio Africanus. As a reward, the Romans granted Massinissa all the cities and territories he had conquered, leading to the birth of the kingdom of Numidia. When Massinissa's reign and life ended simultaneously, his son Micipsa inherited the throne. Micipsa, whose brothers Mastanabal and Gulusa had died of illness, raised his own sons, Adherbal and Hiempsal, along with Jugurtha, the son of Mastanabal. Sallust notes that, as soon as Jugurtha grew up, endowed as he was with physical strength, a handsome appearance, and above all, a vigorous intellect, Micipsa was initially pleased, believing that Jugurtha's prowess would enhance the glory of his kingdom. However, upon recognizing the strong loyalty Jugurtha inspired among the Numidians, Micipsa grew apprehensive about a potential rebellion and felt his reign was threatened. The Numidian king attempted several methods to eliminate Jugurtha, including assigning him to aid Rome in their wars with Numantia, hoping he would never return. Unexpectedly, this only increased Jugurtha's popularity and earned him new friends in Rome, including Scipio Aemilianus, the general behind the fall of Carthage in 146 BC. Long story short, Micipsa eventually died, and driven by his desire to rule as the sole king of Numidia, Jugurtha killed his cousins Hiempsal, then Adherbal, and finally Massiva, in Rome with the help of his assistant Bomilcar. Jugurtha got away with his crimes thanks to the avarice of Roman nobles and his own wealth, firmly believing that anything, including impunity, could be bought in Rome. Sallust recounts that when Jugurtha left the city, he looked back and said, "A city for sale, and doomed to speedy destruction if it finds a purchaser." It was not until Gaius Marius was elected Roman consul that Jugurtha's stratagems were brought to an end. Marius, along with his quaestor Lucius Sulla, waged war against Jugurtha and the Numidians at various locations, ultimately defeating the Numidian king and their allies, the Moors, led by their king Bocchus. After lengthy negotiations between Sulla and Bocchus, the latter betrayed Jugurtha, handing him over to the Romans and marking the end of the Jugurthine War in 106 BC. While many interesting details about this war are worth exploring, I will now return to the main subject. Sallust's description of the various events in his Bellum Jugurthinum shows his deep familiarity with North African geography. likely due to his role as governor of Africa Nova only 50 years after the Jugurthine War. His work, among the few and by far the best, served as a guide for identifying Numidian cities based on the landscape he meticulously described. Other notable works, including those by Pomponius Mela and Pliny the Elder, were also used by modern historians, led by Stéphane Gazelle, in an attempt to reconstruct the Numidian map along its borders and to identify its capital, Cirta Regia. Eventually, Gazelle found in present-day Constantine the lost city of Cirta. This identification has been widely accepted by scholars, despite some discrepancies between Sallust's descriptions and Constantine's landscape features. By the mid-20th century, however, a French scholar presented a different view, challenging both the association of Cirta with Constantine and the extent of the Numidian Kingdom. Geographical mutation. The two Cirtas, an article published on May 11, 1949, in Le Petit Matin, presented a groundbreaking hypothesis suggesting that Cirta, a historical capital long believed to be Constantine, was actually located in the Tunisian city of El Kef. This thesis, put forward by Mr. André Berthier, curator of the Gustave Mercier Museum in Constantine, and a distinguished archaeologist known for his numerous excavations and publications, who had spent several decades researching Cirta Constantine, the heart of the Numidian Kingdom, only to find that his research pointed to a different location, hundreds of miles away from Constantine. Mr. Jacques Juillet, the director of the prefect's office in Constantine, was the first supporter of Mr. Berthier's thesis and soon became his teammate. On May 18, 1949, Mr. Juillet presented their arguments with all due diligence and thoroughness to the National Society of Antiquaries of France. The specialists who attended his presentation, including Mr. Alfred Merlin and Mr. André Pigagnol, urged that Mr. Juillet and Mr. Berthier publish their work as soon as possible and considered it worthy of a grant from the National Center for Scientific Research. In October 1949, Mr. René Louis published their results in a well-documented study in Revue Hommes et Monde, bringing Cirta El Kef to the attention of the general public. Subsequent publications by these authors, which continue to challenge the prevailing consensus and the traditionally accepted methods for identifying Numidian cities, faced opposition from several scholars and earned them many enemies in the field of archaeology. While some were reluctant to admit their own misinterpretations and instead looked for inconsistencies and gaps in Berthier's thesis, a few were open to the possibility that Cirta, the renowned capital of the Numidian Kingdom, could plausibly be El Kef. From Berthier's incontestable research, we learn that history involves more than just reading ancient texts, deciphering inscriptions, and interpreting artwork and symbols. It requires a nuanced understanding of both chronology and geography to accurately place major events within their proper temporal and spatial contexts. When insufficient attention is given to chronology, historical narratives can become muddled and illogical, as evidenced by the case of Numidia, which has often been mapped too expansively, stretching from the Sirtis in Libya to the Maluca River in Morocco. As a result, scholars often faced challenges in accurately placing historical events within contemporary geographical locations. 。 The first thing we notice upon reading Sallust's work is that he mentions 16 cities: Capsa, Carthage, Hippo, Hadrumetum, Lares, Sicca, Suthul, Tala, Termida, Tisidium, Vaga, Zama, Utica, Leptis Minor, Leptis Magna, and Searta. In addition to Searta, there are 4 cities referred to as Regiae, likely due to their connection with the Numidian kings. These are Bulla Regia, Hippo Regius, Thermida Regia, and Zama Regia. One might wonder, if Searta is Constantine, how is it that it is so far away and isolated from the other cities of the kingdom? Could this suggest that the Regnum Numidiae might have been essentially Tunisian? One interesting archaeological finding is that all inscriptions mentioning Numidian kings or individuals of royal lineage, whose interpretation is certain, point to the following sites: Duga, Maktar, Cremissa, and El Kef. There are no such inscriptions in Constantine. This, in turn, raises a compelling question. How is it that the capital city, where many Numidian kings resided, lacks inscriptions of its rulers? Ancient historians, including Polybius and Appian, recount that the economic prosperity of the kingdom of Numidia relied wholly on agriculture. Shortly after ascending to the throne, Massinissa focused not on vast, unproductive territories, but on the small areas of agricultural prosperity and commercial wealth. These areas were chiefly contiguous with, or within, the Carthaginian frontier, where Carthaginian expertise had established the foundations of scientific agriculture. Massinissa then converted the Numidians into farmers, according to Strabo and Appian. In an intriguing study published in 1928, Mr. Carcopino demonstrated a strong connection between the cult of Ceres and the Numidians. He revealed that the Berber kings of the Massinissa lineage were promoters of the cult of Ceres, the agrarian goddess of fertility, Demeter and Kore, which had been adopted by the Carthaginians from the Greeks of Syracuse in the early 4th century BC. According to Carcopino, inscriptions related to Ceres and her cult are found west of the Fossa Regia, within the Numidian Kingdom. However, it is noteworthy that the center of these inscriptions is not in Constantine, but much further east, in Tunisia itself. This suggests that Constantine lay outside the Numidian cultural sphere, even in relation to this significant religious tradition. Unexpected, isn't it? Let us return to Sallust. He mentions a specific location in his account that serves as a useful marker in our attempt to reconstruct the map of the Numidian Kingdom. Sallust writes, "The greater number of the Gaetulians and Numidia, as far as the river Maluca, were subject to Jugurtha, and not far from the river Maluca, which separated the realms of Jugurtha and Bocchus." According to Stefan Zell, the Maluca mentioned by Sallust as the border between the kingdoms of Bocchus and Jugurtha corresponds to the Muluya River in modern-day Morocco. Based on this reading, the Moors referred to by Sallust would then be the inhabitants of present-day Morocco at the beginning of the Jugurthine War. However, this identification, like the proposed identification of Constantine with Cirta Regia, faces significant challenges. First, the Moroccan Muluya River was known in antiquity as the Malva, as noted by both Pomponius Mela and Pliny the Elder. While these authors do mention a Maluca River, they clearly refer to a different geographical location. Some scholars, including Zell, propose that the same river may have borne two names. However, this seems unlikely given the distinct historical and geographical contexts in which each name appears. Moreover, Sallust's narrative indicates that the interval between the capture of Capsa, the establishment of Marius's campaign at Searta, and the march toward the Maluca River spans only a few weeks, or at most, a few months. Given this short time frame, it is difficult to accept that Sallust's Maluca refers to the Muluya in far western Morocco, which would imply a journey of over 1,500 kilometers. Some historians have proposed alternative chronologies in an attempt to reconcile the events between the siege of Capsa and the battle fought near the Maluca River. Such reconstructions, however, are highly implausible. It is difficult to believe that Sallust would have overlooked a chronological discrepancy of this magnitude, especially given that his narrative provides precise indications of time, distances, and the sequence of operations. For this reason, this hypothesis has been deemed absurd by the French historian André Piganiol. In light of this, would it not be more reasonable to seek the Maluca River in Tunisia itself, where Sallust situates a series of battles led by Metellus, and then Marius, in Vaga, Zama, Thala, and Capsa, within a radius of roughly 200 kilometers? To place the subsequent Battle of the Maluca more than 1,500 kilometers away is scarcely credible.